Hey everybody, it's Jamie from Marine Doctor's YouTube channel, and today it's duck season. No, it's rabbit season. Duck season. Rabbit season. All right. For those of you that kind of know that old cartoon where finally it ends up as duck season and Elmer Fudd blows away Daffy Duck, I want to talk about Mercury versus Mariner. I want to talk about Evinrude versus Johnson. What else was Mariner versus Yamaha, right? That was another thing that was happening years ago. And what else do we want to talk about? Engineering. That's what it was, the engineering. So is it an engineering failure or a part failure that causes the bad publicity when it comes to boat motors? So if we go back in time, and let's start with the Mercruiser versus the old stringer drive from OMC. Obviously, the clear Bugs Bunny or the rabbit season was Mercruiser back then, and continued for a lot of years after that until the arrival of Volvo, where things started to even out. Now, the OMC stringer had a lot of issues. That was a complete, in my opinion, an engineering failure. That was a Daffy Duck season, right? Or a duck season, I should say. Now, why? Well, the tilt motor, the knuckles, the fact that you couldn't operate the drive in the up position at all. What else was there? Oh, the big rubber boot on the back that was the seal to hold water out or hold it in as it came in. A tilt that always failed. You could replace it. I remember guys would say, well, can you rebuild my tilt? And we'd say, well, no, but we can put a new motor in for you, and spend 3 or 4 hours moving the gas tank out of the way to get at that ridiculously placed tilt motor, put it in, and have it go up and down 2 or 3 times and not move after that. Just a disaster, just complete disaster. We fast forward a couple years, and they like I said, once they started doing some Volvo stuff with Cobra drive and whatnot, it was better, right? Volvo now is a great drive, and I think comparable to Mercruiser. So what about the smaller engines? We look at the 9.8 Merc, we look at the 9.9 Johnson. I think, for me, in my opinion, and you guys can argue this and comment below about what you guys think is a duck or a rabbit season for a particular engine, but I think in that era, and we even take in account the 20 Merc versus we won't yeah, that's a toss-up, and I'll get to that in a sec. So that 7.5 and the 9.8 versus the 9.9 Johnson, 15 Johnson, I'm gonna give hands down to Johnson Evinrude at that time. They're definitely the rabbit season, guaranteed, 100%. There were so many quirks that those little 9.8s and 7.5s had. The water channels were too small. The water pump was too small. It would break off. It would plug everything off. The electronics, the fact that they used a big cage to hold the cowling on at times. If you had to work on one just to get at the carburetor, it was too much effort. It was just an engineering flop. It was, okay, and that even coupled with the 20 engineering flop. It just terrible idea, terrible. That didn't come down to, we just had a bad part that was manufactured poorly by someone, and it just didn't work. So we had to come up with some kind of replacement for it. None of that stuff. Just a complete and utter disaster. If we compare that though to the 20 Johnson at the time, I'm gonna say that, well, it was marginally better. It was easier to work on, but still not an engine I would want to own. They come into the shop, it's got a tiny gear case on it. It's got a great big heavy top end. Just not a good idea for its time. Mercury had a larger gear case, provided better lift. I'll give them the, props for that. Prop. For that idea, and also the through hub exhaust which was great. But yeah, that's where we're gonna go with those two. Let's move into I guess it would be the mid 80s, 84, 85, somewhere in there, when Mercury made their change over to their next generation of 20 and 25s, and as did Johnson Evinrude. So they came out with a larger version of a gear case that was a nightmare to work on. I just don't know what to say. To me, that was an engineering fault on the larger gear case, just the way they did it. They should have just left it as a conventional gear case that kind of shifted like everybody else's, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, to put those things together, horrible job, horrible job. Mercury, on the other hand, straightforward design, lots of power, fantastic engine. The 2025, great engine. I was sad to see it be retired and replaced by a Tohatsu two-stroke. That would be in the 2000s, when they finally just discontinued that product, because they're getting rid of the two-stroke stuff. If we move into the 35, the 35 was in contention with the 20 for Johnson and Evinrude. Very similar engine, just a larger version. And no, not a good engine in my opinion. Again, that would have been a duck year for them. Mercury at that time, they had, well, their offering was a 35 that had some kind of cage around it so that you couldn't work on it very easily. Two-cylinder, well, we coupled that in with the 40. I guess the 40 would have been a four-cylinder, but again, they threw that cage on it and made it really complex to work on. You couldn't get at the carburetors. You had to take too much stuff apart. Engineering failure. Flop. I said it. It's a flop. They ran good when they ran, and as far as I'm concerned, they ran better than their counterparts, the Johnson 35 and 40. Once we moved into the 50, this is when we started having issues with Johnson and Evinrude, because people still wanted to do water sports with a 50, but they weren't built for that. They were built for fishing. So then we had connecting rods coming through the block. So was that in engineering? Yes. But it was probably also maybe in the fabrication. No one told them down the line that maybe you should have put heavier rods in. Or did they screw up on the rods? No, we'll go with engineering. That was an engineering failure. The 54-cylinder for Mercury, outside of having the cage on it to get the cover off and so on and so forth, and being hard to work on, we'll go with that engine. I think. Once we move into the 70 Merc, I can hear the laughter now. 3 cylinders, 2 carburetors, and just to mention, we'll throw the 70 and 75 Force in there that had 1 carburetor, just so that we could. But honorable mention to them, and that of course flopped. But the 70 Merc, what were they thinking? They needed to fill a hole between the 50 and the, well, I guess they had a 60 to it at one time, but they needed something to fill that gap with 70 horsepower, because the boats were starting to get a little bit larger with consumers. So they brought out that 70, and well, again, what were you thinking? Engineering flop. It's not that it had bad parts on it, it was just an engineering flop. It just was. Enter the 70 Johnson. By then they'd had the 65 and then had the 60. They'd ironed out a lot of bugs. Great engine, outside of, over time, you get that 70 bog that was taken care of by rejetting and redoing the sink and link and advancing timing and other things that made those engines run quite well. So that was a rabbit season versus the duck season from Mercury for that era of engines. So that would have been, the late 70s through mid 80s, I think they were running that stuff. Where can we go from here? We can get into the 75s, 90s. Mercury from day 175, 90, 115, 140, 150 inline 6 product. You guys can argue this all you want, but it's trash. It was an engineering flop. Very complex to work on. Too many things to go wrong. Plastic bleeder valves that would melt. Engine would flood one cylinder below it. Just bad ideas. Again, reinventing the wheel. Why didn't they just use hoses like OMC did with their product to bleed the extra fuel off the cylinders? Choke system, let's choke the top 2 cylinders and not choke the bottom one, so that they're hard to start and you wear out your starter. And people are frustrated down at the lake because they could never get them started. Just engineering flop. Again, this didn't come down to bad parts, and I'll get to the bad parts a little bit later on in the video with some of the newer stuff, but just engineering flop. It was. Enter the 85, the 90, the 115. and sorry, in the 140, fantastic engine from Johnson. So this would be the looper style, no, crossflow, sorry, the crossflow engine was great. We still repair those. We see tons of them to work on because so many were sold in our area. It's not that they were bad engines that they need to be worked on. People are just using them and wearing them out or causing failures on certain items on them. But they ran decent chokes. They ran primers later on. I know Mercury ran primers later on their inline six stuff, but I don't know if it really helped that much. We had too many people coming to the yard saying, hey, can you show me how to start my engine because I have too many problems with it. But yeah, as far as that goes, always good starting engines. They ran nice, good idle, good trolling, fantastic engines, a couple less cylinders to worry about things going wrong with when you got to the larger ones. Good overall engines. Oil injection. Let's talk about oil injection. Engineering marvel. What do you guys think? First ones that came out, more of a duck season? I think so, yeah. So we had Yamaha, great product, great oil injection system. It worked well. That worked well. That was gear driven. We get into Auto Blend, which was Mercury's offering, or VRO, which was OMC's offering at that time. So that's Johnson and Evinrude. And entered around that same time, ethanol blended fuel started coming in. Well, ethanol blended fuel didn't really make a good name for the VRO offering, did it? So many grenaded top ends that people were just disgusted with the fact that VRO was a failure right from the get-go and didn't want to have anything to do with it after that, even though they came out with VRO 2, which was supposed to fix the issue, but damage was done. So even today, we still have people complaining that, oh, you've got to take the VRO off or you've got to disconnect your oil injection because it can fail. Well, people can fail too. Just because you're adding oil to the gas doesn't mean you're doing it right and or doing it. Because believe it or not, we see people that, well, unfortunately, that happens, right? They didn't realize it was a 2-stroke. Their neighbor told them it was a 4-stroke, so they didn't throw oil in it. Well, what do you think happened? We've had people come in and say, yeah, my oil keeps going down in the tank inside my boat. Where's it leaking? Well, it's going into your engine because it's a 2-stroke. Yeah, we see things like that. So when I went to service school with Mercury, they told us that anyone that still has an auto blend inside their boat were to tell them to remove it and kind of insist on it because it's going to fail. Did you know that the first ones that came out used 9-volt batteries for the alarms? Yes, they did. Great idea. Why not hook it to the 12-volt battery so that we always know that, hey, if the engine starts, it must be getting power, so it'll work, right? So they had us all suggest that they be taken off. Where to now? So that would have been engineering as well as possibly because I guess they didn't know about I guess they probably did know about the alcohol coming in and could have done it properly in the first place. But let's move on to what the next part of what I want to talk about is the newer engines and some of the old ones, and we'll lead into this from the VRO. We have failures of parts inside of engines that give the engine a bad name. Okay, so as far as it stands, the majority of the new stuff is engineering marvels, right? They've done great things with the products, but it's what they add to them that cause the issues. So an example would be if Mercury sold tilt and trims. They've had issues with tilt and trims right through the years. So an engineering failure because the cylinder keeps cracking, as well as they didn't update in time the thermal valve in it so that would go away. So we still get people that bought engines years and years and years and years, like 10, 20 years ago, still coming in with cracked cylinders because it was never taken care of properly. It was an engineering failure at that time, as well as it wasn't looked after, which kind of gave a bad name to Mercury/Mariner at that time. Let's pick on Mercury a little bit more. Fuel pumps, specifically on the 2006.5 and newer L4 engines. So that's the inline 475 and up through Verado, right? They had a hose inside, and at that point, so that would have been what, 2006, right? And higher. ethanol was going in and making that hose burst, or cracking it, or causing holes, making it swell, damaging it to the point where it became an issue. And we had to become aware of it in the field. And the first thing we would go after was someone came in with a bad engine is put the fuel pressure tester on, see what it's doing, take the FSM apart, replace that hose. Okay, so that's not an engineering failure. That's they got someone to make a part for them, and the people that made the part for them failed. Okay, enter the floats for that same engine. Floats were really bad. They would start to stick over time. Not an engineering problem. That was a vendor problem. We'll call them vendors because Mercury also buys, and just as Johnson Evinrude did at the time, or Yamaha does, they don't build everything in-house. So Carter, for example, is a company that builds fuel pumps. I think they were making the ones for the E-Tech and for Ficht. And over time, issues would pop up with those too, and you'd have to replace them. And again, that gives the brand name, which would be Mercury Mariner or Johnson Evinrude or Suzuki or Yamaha, a bad name when it's not really their fault, but they're the ones left hanging and having to take care of it. One more from Mercury was, two more. They had a red stator implementation, so we had black stators that were known to fail. They were guaranteed to fail. The windings, I believe, on the stators were too fine, and from the heat of the engine and cooling off and heating up and the vibration, they would snap and the guy would be left out on the water, no ignition. So we'd have to swap out that stator with the new red one that they came out with. Also, ignition coils. So again, these are items that a vendor supplies to the manufacturer so that they can run their engines. So Mercury would say, give them the specs, this is what we need. The vendor then builds them, and not long after they start installing these coils, they start blowing out ECMs because the ground path fails. Things like that. So that gives the brand a bad name, but it's actually the vendor that's responsible for it. We see this in the automotive industry as well. We lean on Chevy, we lean on GMC. We say that, I would never buy a GMC, I'm a Chev guy. Well, here's to you, buddy, because it's the same thing. Painted a different color, maybe a different grille, different set of headlights. It's the same thing on the inside. Anyway, that's where I was going with this. Sometimes we blame the vendor, sometimes we blame the manufacturer, but there's always someone to blame. There's always going to be little things wrong with engines, quirks, things that they need to work through to make them better. And then once they get them to the point where they're really good and there's never going to be an issue again, we hope, then they change the platform and they come out with another generation and they start all over. Isn't that something, the way it works? But without the innovation, we don't get stuff that's better. And we need competition in the market, and that's where we can say it's too bad that we lost Evinrude. BRP picked up their bat, their glove, and their ball, and they left the park. And Mercury, Suzuki, and Yamaha, Honda, they're left to play by themselves and get away with a lot more of what there's less competition in the market. That means there's less control of pricing, and innovation at times can slow down. Okay, I know Mercury's been making strides. They've been doing things. Yamaha, they're getting better, but are they getting better at the pace that they would have been if E-Tech was still around? Anyway, thanks guys for watching, and comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.